thank you for the organizers of this important event, and thank you for your time and your coming. I came from Gaza. Gaza Strip is a very small part of Palestine. It's only represent 1% of the historic Palestine. About 2/3 of the Palestinians in Gaza are refugees. And our story, the story of the refugees, started in 1948. It was the same year of the establishment of Israel, when the Zionist groups came and committed a lot of massacres and destroyed hundreds of the villages, then forced about 720,000 of the Palestinian people out of about 900,000, the population of the Palestinian people at that time. So the majority of the Palestinian people forced them to leave their lands forcefully, so they became refugees, and they are now about 7 million Palestinian refugees. Some of the Palestinian refugees at that time went to Gaza Strip, like my own family. Others went to West Bank, others to Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Europe, the United States, Latin America. So the establishment of Israel meant for the Palestinians that they became a people without homeland. And this was the beginning, but it wasn't the end, because Israel, after that, he continued its policies of expulsion and annexation and settlement and massacres and occupying the rest of Palestine, Gaza Strip and West Bank in 1967, and put hundreds of thousands of the Palestinians in prisons, and destroyed tens of thousands of the homes of the Palestinians. So in Nakba catastrophe, it wasn't only an event started and finished on 1948, but it's a continuous process from that day until now, until 2020. I will speak today about the situation in Gaza, where I live, and also because I never visited the rest of Palestine. I never experienced how the people live in West Bank and in the Palestine occupied 1948. This is because of the Israeli deliberate separation between the Palestinians. So the Palestinians themselves, especially the new generations, they cannot connect each other. They cannot arrive to the rest of their homes. Gaza is a very small place. It's actually an open-air prison. It's one of the highest densely population around the world. 2.2 million Palestinians live in a closed area. It's only 365 square kilometers. And the majority of the people in Gaza, especially the new generations, they never left Gaza. They never met another person from another culture and another language because of the Israeli blockade. Israeli didn't allow for the foreigners to enter Gaza, but with very few expectations for some journalists and some international personalities, and it often doesn't allow for the Palestinians to leave Gaza Strip and to be able to travel, also to visit the West Bank or Jerusalem or Palestine occupied 1948. Gaza is a big concentration camp controlled by the Israeli occupation Authority. But the reality that Gaza is worse than the prison, because even the prisons, in the democratic states, the prisoners can take good services, can access to the electricity, can have water and food. But Gaza, the people cannot find the complete or the suitable medical services. They cannot find the drinkable water. According to the reports from the United Nations, 97% of the water in Gaza undrinkable. They even the patients in Gaza, they cannot access to the hospitals in West Bank and the rest of Palestine. So in the last 12 years, the years of the Israeli blockade, hundreds of the patients were died because they have urgent situation to access to the hospitals, but they should with the Israeli permit. And the Israeli permit came after long weeks and sometimes long months, and in a lot of times Israel denied the access of the patients to the hospitals. So by this way, hundreds of the patients were died. So the situation in Gaza is not only prison, it's worse than the prison, because they imprison the people, besiege the people, but didn't provide the basic human necessities for them. In the last 13 years, after the Palestinian elections, Israel imposed a blockade against the Gaza Strip. At that 13 years, Israel committed many aggressions against Gaza. It killed more than 4,000 of the people in Gaza. The majority of them are civilians, and also it controlled the movement of the people to lift Gaza or to enter Gaza. Also, it controlled the movement of the goods. So the Palestinians in Gaza, they couldn't export their goods and their products. This led to the collapse of the economy. Also, Israel didn't allow for the machines to enter Gaza, so the Palestinian workers and the Palestinian factories cannot activate the economy. Instead of this, Israel destroyed in those aggressions more than 500 factories and facilities, and after that didn't allow for the machines to enter again to Gaza. Why Israel targeted the facilities and the factories? Because it doesn't want just to kill the fighters or the people in Gaza, but also it wants to undermine the economy. It tried to make Gaza unlivable place according to systemically policy from in the last 13 years. And this is the reality now. The reality now, according to the United Nations, Gaza became unlivable place. Israel also destroyed the only airport that the Palestinian Authority built it on 1998. On 2000, Israel destroyed it only after 2 years from its building, and until now, it prevents the Palestinians from rebuilding it. Israel also is banning the Palestinians from building a seaport to be able to connect with the outside world. At the same time, the Palestinians discovered on 1997 a field of gas in the coastline of Gaza Sea, the Mediterranean, but until now, after 22 years from that discovery, they cannot exploit this gas. If they did, then they would be self-independent economically. But Israel wanted for Gaza and for the Palestinians in general to keep unable to have their independence, to have their conditions of life. So when we speak about Gaza and when we speak about how Israel treat with Gaza, it's a complete blockade. It's a systematical killing for all the conditions of the human life in Gaza. In addition to the killing the Palestinians physically, Israel also killed and is still killing the Palestinians psychologically. So when we speak about whole generations, they never left that small area. They never met persons from other countries. Also, they never saw planes in the sky. They never used the train, used the plane, because yes, we saw in the sky of Gaza planes in the sky, but it's only the Israeli warplanes, so it's symbolized in our minds and in our hearts to the death. To me, the first time I left Gaza was in 2012 when I was about 26 years old. And when I arrived to Cairo, then I saw the planes in the sky landed to the Cairo airport and get off. Then I was very interested with this scene, and I saw and I wrote at that time, it's the first time I feel in myself that the planes can be used also for the life. It's not necessary to be used only for the death as Israel made with the Palestinians. So this is the situation in the prison called Gaza in simple words. The people in Gaza are deprived, first of all, from their freedom, then they are deprived from the necessities of their life. Also, they cannot see any hope, any future in this hard reality. So it's exactly as if you put a person inside a room, then deprived him first from his life, then deprived him from the basic necessities, the food, the medicine, everything. Then what can we expect this person will do? The only choice he can make it to knock the door, to try to survive himself, to try to break the door. This is the human nature. This is the human nature. And this is exactly what the Palestinians in Gaza made in the last 2 years when they tried to protest peacefully, when they tried to break the silence, when they tried to escape from the situation of the slow death they suffer from because of the Israeli blockade. On 9th December 2017, 2 days after Trump's declaration of moving the embassy to Al-Quds, Jerusalem, I went near the fence which separated Gaza from our occupied villages and towns, what's called Israel. At that moment I was with my friend, then my friend Hassan told me, Ahmed, look, this is the fence which separates us from our land. Then he said to me, Ahmed, look to the birds in the sky. I looked to the birds in the sky. Then at that moment I felt angry and sad. And I wrote that day on my Facebook profile, I recorded my emotions. I said, why not we be like the birds? The birds have rights more than us humans. They decided to fly, then they fly easily without borders. What if I, as a human, saw myself a bird and decided to walk in the nature, and I didn't see this foolish fence. I only saw the trees after that fence. So if I did this, why the Israeli snipers will kill me as if I made a crime? Also, I wrote at that post, now I discovered why I refuse the occupation. I refuse the occupation because it's in contradictory with the law of the nature. Even the birds and the dogs more clever than the politicians, because they don't recognize these fences and borders. In the coming days after that post, I recorded another post on my Facebook profile. I said, what if 200,000 of the Palestinians in Gaza decided to protest peacefully near the fence? This will be better than the slow death we live inside this prison. So we want our life, and we don't want more than our dignified life. So let us knock the door of the prison. Let us break the door of the prison. And I ended that post with a proposed hashtag Great March of Return. Then, in the few days after that post, hundreds of the activists in Gaza reacted with this post because it touched their hearts. The people reacted with this call because it touched their hearts, because it expressed what they were feeling, that we cannot wait anymore. We cannot wait in this hard situation, a situation of slow death. So widely and fastly this idea became a mainstream inside Gaza Strip, and after about 2 months and half, this idea became a reality. On March 30, 2018, about 100,000 of the Palestinians were collecting near the fence, and they were completely peaceful. Their demand was very simple. We demand our freedom. We demand our life. We are refugees, and we have the international law to return to our homes. So we cannot accept more to stay in this horrible situation. They were families, elderly people, women, all the Palestinian peoples, all the factions, all the organizations participated in that national day to convey their message and to make their voices heard for the world, that we want the life and we deserve the life and the freedom. Those protesters, tens of thousands of the protesters, were completely unarmed, and they didn't pose any threat against the Israeli soldiers. But the Israeli government decided deliberately to kill them. So the Israeli soldiers started to shoot them deadly. From that day until the end of 2019, Israel killed more than 300 unarmed protesters and injured more than 30,000 of the peaceful protesters. Hundreds of the injured people were maimed and had permanently disabled. Why Israel made this? Why Israel committed this horrible crime against humanity? They never posed any threat against the Israeli soldiers. Israel made this because it didn't want for the voice of the crime, with the victims, for the voice of the victims to be heard in the world. It wanted to make or to continue its image around the world that it's a democratic state, that it wasn't it wasn't built at expense of a whole people. It doesn't want for the world to remember that Israel started from the first day at expense of millions of people, and they are still, until today, they are suffering under its occupation and its settlement and its ethnic cleansing. Israel killed the civilians, and it's continuing its crimes and continuing its settlement and its occupation and its walls because it feels impunity. It feels that the world is not serious to punish it, to push it to implement the international law. Israel doesn't take its power from inside, but from outside. Because Israel know that the governments, the European governments and the American administration fund it economically and support it politically, so it continue its violations against the international law and its violations against the human rights. I want to give you one example. The commercial exchange between the European Union and Israel only in 2017 was 36.2 billion euros. 36.2 billion euros. This money became in Palestine bullets, killed the civilians, became in Palestine illegal settlements, became in Palestine bulldozers, destroyed the houses of the Palestinians, and Israel already destroyed tens of thousands of the Palestinian houses. So Israel, when Israel be strong economically, this means more occupation, more violations, more expulsion against the people. The paradox that that the European governments support Israel despite Israel violates the European values and the European laws itself. As example, the European Union considered the settlements are illegal, but in the same time, the goods were made in the settlements are here in the European markets. Israel, the European Union criticized the Israeli crimes against the protesters, but in the same time, the companies which manufacture these weapons that kill the protesters and kill the Palestinians and keep the occupation has strong relations here in Europe and strong and have strong products here in Europe. So it's unacceptable to support the Israeli violations against your laws and against your values. If we ask any person today and say to him, imagine before 30 years from now, the people in South Africa were treated according to their colors. If you was a white man or a black man, then you have a different treatment. If we ask any person today about this situation, he will say, this is a horrible situation. It's unacceptable. It's undemocratic. It's unmodern situation. But the reality that Israel keeps this situation until now. Israel in the 21st century is building and practicing the apartheid system. Israel treat with the people according to their ethnicity, according to their race. If you have a look from the sky of Palestine, you will not believe that we are in the 20th century. The walls that Israel built imprison millions of people and control their life, and they cannot have their freedom to move but with the Israeli control. Checkpoints, hundreds of checkpoints. If you were a Jewish citizen in Israel, then you will be privileged. But if you was non-Jewish citizen, then you will be demographic threat as in the eyes of Israeli government. If any Jewish man around the world decided now to go to Palestine, then Israel will say to him in the airport, welcome, and will give him the nationality, the full citizenship, will give him the freedom to live anywhere he decides. What if me, as a Palestinian refugee, and my family were expelled out from our original village, Ramla? It's now in Israel. What if me decided to return there? What Israel will make with me? The same thing as it made with the Palestinian refugees in the March of Return. It will kill me. So what's the difference? Who has the priority to go to occupied Palestine? A man from the United States or from Ethiopia, he never stayed there only because, and his parents never stayed there, only because he is a Jewish man. Or the Palestinian refugees, they were expelled out from their lands, and they have the international law, and they have the resolution 194 from the United Nations to return to their homes, and they are still until now live miserable life in the camps of refugees. So they have the priority to return to their homes. But Israel doesn't allow for them because they are non-Jews. If there is another man, even if he live in another country with another passport and another nationality, and he has his full citizenship and his complete rights, but Israel will find a room to him inside Palestine because. So this is the racism. This is the apartheid, to treat with the people not according to their equality, but according to their race or their ethnicity. So this is our struggle. We struggle to create a world without racism, without apartheid, a world based on equality for everyone, based on freedom for everyone. We don't have a problem with the Jews. This is the Israeli propaganda. This is the Israeli invention. Our problem is with the apartheid. Our problem is with the injustice. So it's our common struggle. We struggle to make the future better for the next generations and for our children to find themselves in a world without apartheid, a world they can live together based on their equal humanity, not based on the relation between oppressors and oppressed people. And that world will be more safe and more peaceful and more stable for everyone, including the Israelis themselves. Because, yes, Israel now it made the apartheid against the Palestinians and it put us inside the walls. But in the same time, Israel imprisons itself in these walls, the walls of hatred and the walls of racism. And I don't think it will be in the benefit of the next generation, the next Israeli generation, to stay in this situation, the situation of fear and the situation of racism. So we struggle to free us as Palestinians from the occupation from the racism, but in the same time, this struggle will be in the benefit of the Israelis themselves, because it will liberate them from the walls of fear and the walls of racism, and enable them to live normally as all the other humans and all the other peoples. And this is why our struggle is global. It's not only our struggle inside Palestine. It's the struggle of everyone who believe in freedom and who believe in equality for everyone. Israel pushed the world to become worse. So, yes, we are suffering inside Palestine, but because of Israel, Trump was inspired the idea of the war with Mexico. And because of Israel, now here in Europe, they try to restrict the freedom of speech. It's the main value that the European Union based on it. So now they say, if you criticize Israel, then this is anti-Semitism. So because of Israel, because of the Israeli crimes, they want now to make restrictions and limits for the freedom of speech. So we want a world without this fear, without this terror. We want a world based on equality and based on human rights, not based on the walls of racism and hatred and fear. So you are our partners in this struggle. All of us together struggle to get the freedom for everyone. We hope you are our partners in this struggle. We should send a strong message for Israel and for the supporters of Israel that we don't allow for our money, for the money of taxpayers to become in Palestine bullets kill the civilians. So I think the most effective way to show solidarity for the Palestinian rights now, to support BDS, to boycott Israel, not only the Israeli goods, but also to boycott all the Israeli companies, all the companies that help this occupation and support this occupation. The BDS is very necessary to push Israel to respect the international law and to end this inhumane reality, the reality of the apartheid and the reality of the occupation and the reality of expulsion. I hope all of us be together in this struggle and continue this struggle until we achieve the freedom and we achieve the equality in this world. That's it. Thank you.